Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. Well, hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to week 1 of our readings from Venerable Fulton Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. So this week, we are going to be reading about egotism, the enemy of inner peace. And it's so appropriate that this is what we start with as we dive into this book. So much of the sufferings in our world are caused by egotism. And I think as you read through this with me, you're going to be shaking your head. Yes, this is what is going on right now in the world. And we have to remember that Fulton Sheen lived before this time right now. He died in 1979. It's very prophetic. So much of what he writes about today we can completely apply to all that is going on in our world right now. So 3 things that I would keep in mind as we read through this are the words littleness, dependency, and humility. Let's get started. Here's a psychological suggestion for acquiring peace of soul. Never brag. Never talk about yourself. Never rush to first seats at table or in a theater. Never use people for your own advantage. Never lord it over others as if you were better than they. These are but popular ways of expressing the virtue of humility, which does not consist so much in humbling ourselves before others as it does in recognizing our own littleness in comparison to what we ought to be. The modern tendency is toward the affirmation of the ego, the exaltation of selfishness, riding roughshod over others in order to satisfy our own self-centeredness. It certainly has not produced much happiness, for the more the ego asserts itself, the more miserable it becomes. Humility, which gives preference to others, is not very popular today, principally because men have forgotten the greatness of God. By expanding our puny little self to the infinite, we have made the true infinity of God seem trivial. The less knowledge we have of anything, the more insignificant it seems. Our hatred of a person often decreases as we learn to know him better. A boy graduating from high school is generally not as humble as when he graduates from medical school. At 18, he thought he knew it all. At 28, he feels himself ignorant in the face of the medical science he has yet to acquire. So it is with God. Because we do not pray or contemplate or love him, we become vain and proud. But when we know him better, we feel a deep sense of dependence, which tempers our false independence. Pride is the child of ignorance, humility the offspring of knowledge. Proud people think themselves to be better than they are, and when criticized, always believe their neighbor is jealous or has a grudge against them. The humble know themselves as they really are, for they judge themselves as they judge time, by a standard outside themselves, namely, God and his moral law. The psychological reason for the modern fondness for news which deflates others or brings out the evil in their lives is to solace uneasy consciences which are already laden with guilt. By finding others who apparently are more evil than we falsely believe that we are somehow better than the rest of men. Luke 18:11. It used to be that the most popular biographies were stories about the lives of good men and women worthy of our imitation, rather than recounting of scandals for the sake of making us believe we are more virtuous than we really are. The pagan Plutarch said, "The virtues of great men served me as a modern mirror in which I might adorn my own life." Humility as it relates to others is a golden mean between blind reverence on the one hand and an overbearing insolence on the other. Humble people are not rigid exactors of things to which they have no undoubted right. They are always ready to overlook the faults of others, knowing that they have so many themselves. Neither are they greatly provoked at those slights, which put vain persons out of patience, knowing that as we show mercy to others, so shall we receive mercy from God. Before undertaking a task, great or small, before making decisions, before beginning a journey, the humble will acknowledge their dependence on God and will invoke his guidance and his blessing on all their enterprises. Even though they be placed above others by vocation or by the will of the people, they will never cease to recognize that God has made of one blood all the nations that dwell on the earth. If they are very rich, they will not be defenders of the rights of the poor without unloading their riches in their aid. Our modern world has produced a generation of rich politicians who talk love of the poor, but never prove it in action, and a brood of the poor whose hearts are filled with envy for the rich and covetousness of their money. The rich who are humble help rather than use the poor to pave their way to power. Another evidence of want of humility is in regard to knowledge. Scripture bids us to be wise and correctly interpret the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15. Humility moderates our estimate of what we know and will remind us that God gave to the wise more talents than others and more opportunities for developing those talents. But of him who has received much, much also will be expected. The intellectual leader has a tremendous responsibility thrust upon him, and woe to him if he uses his office of teaching to lead the young into error and conceit. Notice how often today authors will have their picture taken with their book in their left hand, the title in full view of the camera, so that the photograph may tell the story. Look, Ma, my book. Television commentators have books on their desks with the title toward the audience, so that the audience may be impressed. No one who reads books at a desk ever has the titles turned away, but toward himself. Perhaps someday, when there are diaphanous walls, the intelligentsia will keep the titles on their bookshelves, turned toward the wall so their next-door neighbor will know how smart they are. In the face of divine wisdom, all that we have, or do, or know, is a gift of God, and is only an insignificant molehill compared to his mountain of knowledge. Well, indeed, then, may those who enjoy any relative superiority ask with Paul, what do you have that you haven't received? And if you've received it, why do you boast as if it were yours alone? 1 Corinthians 4-7. I told you you'd want to highlight everything and underline everything. Well, I pretty much did. I pretty much underlined this entire section because as I was reading through it, I was just going, yes, yes, oh my gosh, yes, how prophetic, yes, and he understands human nature so well, so well. And this is what we've forgotten as a society, is that this scrambling around to puff ourselves up and build up the ego will not give us that inner peace. It just won't. It will never satisfy. And the reason it won't is because if we as humans are made in the image and likeness of God, then selfishness will never satisfy. Never. It will never fill our souls the way that sacrifice and service and just an outpouring of ourselves to others will. Because we are created to be saints. And if we're created to be saints, then we cannot have a puffed up ego. There's just so much in here that I could go over. And for brevity, I can't. And so I really encourage you to self-reflect, because I know as I read through this, I could see myself in a lot of these things. You know, I have wanted to puff up my own ego in order to make people impressed with me. Oh, Amy, look at you. Look at you. You have degrees and you have this kind of life and all of these things. I have wanted in my life to make other people jealous of the things that I've experienced. And I know that about myself, and I do it anyway because it puffs up my ego, because I get all of the compliments, Oh, wow, I wish I had a life like yours. Oh, Amy, you get to do all these amazing things. And in those moments, I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, they want my life. Look at me. And that's so wrong. But so many of us feel that. So many of us feel that. And we're all scrambling around trying to climb on the person next to us. So we can say, well, I'm taller, I'm higher than you. Look at what I did. And in the end, it doesn't really make us happy because it will never satisfy. It will never be enough because there will always be somebody who can outshine us and who is better at something than we are and who is more successful than we are and who has more degrees than we do or whatever it is. There will always be somebody. And so when that happens, when we see that person, our ego deflates and we think we're worthless. And so then we got to find some way to puff ourselves up again. And usually it's at the expense of other people. And the reason this is because of exactly what he says. Because men have forgotten the greatness of God. We've forgotten how little we are. He says that we're puny. We are. When it comes to the power and majesty of God, we are puny. Now, during the Renaissance time, there came this idea because people were flourishing that, well, maybe we don't need God. Maybe we can do this on our own. I mean, look how we are advancing. We got ourselves out of the dark ages. We're making all these advancements in math and the arts and science. And wow, look at us. Do we need God? And since that time, there has been this movement to push God further back on the back burner. Now, put him over there. I don't know if we really need him because look at what we can do. So yeah, I'm not really sure that we do, but it's still kind of nice to call yourself a Christian. I mean, he's a good teacher. So no, but just keep him in the back. Okay. I was talking to my brother recently and he said that we've gotten to the point where as humans, there's a lot we can do, but we need to start asking ourselves, yeah, maybe we can do something, but should we do something? Because it seems to me that when we just decide to do something just because we can, because we're so full of ourselves, because look at what I can do, we do things that we shouldn't just because we can. Another part that I underlined in here was the psychological reason for the modern fondness for news, which deflates others or brings out the evil in their lives, is to solace uneasy consciences. Oh my gosh, isn't this so true? Do you know that on my social media pages, if I ever post something that's like super divisive or, kind of calling out somebody, maybe like a politician or something, man, I will get so many comments. Everybody's commenting and, it's high fives from the crowd and all that kind of stuff. If I just post something about the beauty of our faith or a beautiful Catholic church or, just talking about the love of Christ or anything like that, yeah, I'll get some likes, but it's nothing like what I get if I post something that is calling out somebody else. Now, sometimes I do call out people if they're sinning greatly and they're leaders and they are particular leaders that call themselves Catholic. Yeah, I do call them out from time to time, but it's something that I noticed is that we really like it when we're stomping on somebody. Then we have all kinds of opinions and comments. But if we're talking about the goodness of God, the beauty of God, yeah, I'll cruise on through. I'll pass on by. I don't want to read it. And that's sad, because the reason that is exactly why he says we want to see the dirty news on people, right? We want to see that, and I want to hear about all the gossip of who's doing something wrong. And then what we do is we go into our brains and we're like, okay, that person over there, they do that really bad thing, but I don't. So I'm better than them, and I can look down on them. And yeah, so I feel better about myself. I am not like them. And it doesn't last. And so then we need the next story where we can look into the messy lives of people and say, oh my gosh, look at them. Oh, what trash. I'm not like them. Thank God I am so much better. But in that moment, there's that ego, that pride that's just getting stroked, and we're just sitting there looking at ourselves and like, I don't have anything to work on. I'm not like all these people over here. I'm good. I'd rather look at their lives than look at my own. Because if I look at my own, I'm going to see that there are things that I need to work on and change. And I really don't feel like doing that, because that'll mean I have to give up the sins that I enjoy. And that's where the struggle comes in, right? He also says something here that I underlined about biographies, and I thought this was really good. He said it used to be that the most popular biographies were stories about the lives of good men and women worthy of our imitation. I read the classics with my kids, and they are such fantastic stories. The homeschooling curriculum that I use gives us all kinds of saint books to read and the classics to read. And they really are about characters who go through a growth, go through a change, become more virtuous. Maybe they're sunk in some kind of sin, and you see the growth of them fighting against the vices in their lives to become virtuous people. Or they're the good guy fighting against the bad guy. Today, it's all a mix of gray. And we actually had a book called 50 Shades of Grey, where it's just debauchery and grossness. But how many people went to read that book? So many people. It's not about virtue. It's all about vice, and yet we wanted to sink ourselves into it. Instead of something like The Tale of Two Cities or To Kill a Mockingbird or Uncle Tom's Cabin. I mean, those are such fantastic books that have such archetypes of Christ in them. And I thought this was so spot on. We don't read those books anymore because we want the dirty little secrets, and we want to see the dirty little lives. And it starts to darken our souls. It really does. Even though it might make us feel better about ourselves, it still darkens our souls. And then we don't have anybody to imitate in virtue, because we're not reading about the saints because, those are boring. And, we're not reading those classic books because, they're written kind of weird and I don't know how to read them. And we go then to, the tabloidy type things because they're easy to read. I get to get all the details of people's lives that, are the gossipy types of things. And then I feel better about myself for a half a second. The last part that I want to talk about is at the very top of page 5. And this is where it shows us what a humble person is. Humble people are not rigid exactors of things to which they have no undoubted right. They are always ready to overlook the faults of others, knowing that they have so many themselves. The person that annoys you the most is sometimes a person that God puts in your path for you to love, because it won't be easy. And that's when real love shows up. But we also need to remember that we are the most annoying person in the world to somebody out there. And we want them to forgive our faults, but yet we're so unwilling to do it for other people. He goes on to say, neither are they greatly provoked at those slights which put vain persons out of patience, knowing that as we show mercy to others, so shall we receive mercy from God. And that is so key to the Christian life, is not getting put out by every little thing. We are so impatient. And the reason we are impatient is because we want everything done our way right now. I don't care about you. Do it my way. And I struggle with this just as much as the next person. I don't want to go into a store and have anybody give me any grief. I just want it to go in and be a wonderful experience. Anywhere I go, restaurants, hotels, airlines, everything. The second I get slightly irritated, I'm done. Landslide off the mountain, high dive into the pit of impatience and just bitterness. And nobody wants to be around me. I've just gotten mad at a certain group of people for irritating me, and now I've become, in my impatience and bitterness, the person who irritates everybody else. And so what have I done? I've just made everything worse. But humble people just roll with it. They just roll with it. They know that this life is imperfect and not everything is always going to go their way. And that's what we should strive for. And so what I would really encourage you to do, as we read through Fulton Sheen, like I said in the introduction, reading through his stuff is a great time for reflection. But we should do it with a joyful heart, because what Fulton Sheen has the ability to do is put that mirror in front of our face so that we can become better, that we can become who God created us to be. And any opportunity to look inside and find where we can grow and change, we should embrace that. We really should. We should not run away and say, oh my gosh, that guy, he makes me so uncomfortable. All he does is tell me everything I do wrong. No, just think about it. Is this something that you need to work on? And if it is, then accept that. And so if humility is something that you need to work on, I know I need to work on it for sure. Then take in his words and let them soak into you. And find ways to get just a little better every day. We won't always be great at it. We'll have days where we'll, slide back into our old ways. But if we're aware and we're willing to acknowledge it, that's where true change can come. And that's where we start on our journey to sainthood. And so just let Fulton Sheen teach us and lead us. And I guarantee that it will produce really good fruits in our lives. And so that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here for week 2. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.